This is the end, is the beginning. We are in week 17, video 17. This is a pretty long series that we've been doing through the book of Revelation and other books of the Bible that talk about end times events. And last week we covered it was actually the last video, which was 2 weeks ago. We covered Revelation 13. And that chapter describes the darkness and the wickedness of the two beasts. The first beast is the Antichrist, the second beast is the false prophet. And it can be really easy to read that chapter or watch that video that describes those things and just be overwhelmed with sadness, thinking that the enemy will win, and be overwhelmed with the wickedness of the day. But Revelation chapter 14 gives way to a scene in heaven that is much more encouraging and positive. While the beasts are busy blaspheming God and leading people astray with the image of the beast and the mark of the beast in Revelation 13, the scene in heaven is very, very different. And so today, that's what we're covering. Revelation chapter 14, the Lamb, the 144,000, and the 5 messages. Revelation 14 brings the reader back to the 144,000 saints that are faithful witnesses. Now, there is disagreement by the commentators over whether the 144,000 described in Revelation 14 are the same 144,000 described in Revelation chapter 7. Some commentators think they're a different group, not necessarily the same group of tribulation Messianic Jews as previously discussed. Remember, it was 12,000 Jews who accept Christ during the tribulation from each of the 12 tribes. So 12 times 12,000 is 144,000. They do have some similarities, the group in Revelation 7 and the group in Revelation 14. But more information is actually given in Revelation 14, and it leads some to believe it's a different group entirely. But the fact remains that it really doesn't matter whether they're the same or whether they're a different group. They're in heaven, which means that they were martyred for their faith. And in a previous chapter, and actually Revelation 13:7, it said that the beast was granted power to conquer the tribulation saints. So these could very well be the same group from chapter 7, or they could be another 144,000. We don't know. Revelation 14 gives us a clue that they were martyred saints in the very first line of the chapter. Verse 1, it says this: Then I looked, and I being John, the Apostle John, then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. One of the things that we notice is, first of all, the 144,000 are in heaven, which means they're all deceased. They have most likely been martyred for their faith, but there's something else that's really easy to miss that gives us a clue that they were martyred. They didn't just die a natural death. They were actually martyred for their faith. You see, when Jesus told the Pharisees that they would see him in his kingdom, he said that they would, quote, see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power. When a king or a judge is seated, they are sitting in a place to offer judgment. When you go to court, you stand and you present your case to a judge who is seated. It was that way back then as well. But in Acts chapter 7, as Stephen is being stoned to death, he looked up and he saw Jesus standing at the right hand of God. See, Jesus sits to render judgment, but he stands to give testimony to the Father of faithful witnesses and to receive martyrs. He said that that he would confess our names to the Father if we confess his name. And so he stands he was standing when Stephen was being martyred. And here in Revelation 14, we see the Lamb, Jesus, standing, giving testimony to the Father of the faithful 144,000 witnesses who have completed their mission on earth. Beginning in Revelation 14:6, we are introduced to 5 angels who have 5 unique messages to broadcast. Verses 6 through 7 give us the message of the first angel. John wrote, he said, "Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation and tribe and language and people. And he said with a loud voice, 'Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water.'" So the first message from this first angelic messenger is the eternal gospel. One unique thing here is that once Christ came, the gospel message was entrusted not to angels to spread, but to the church. Well, now the church is gone. A large number of faithful witnesses have been martyred, and so the angels, at least one angel in particular, is entrusted to preach the good news of Jesus Christ himself. And during this time, during the time of the greatest pressure to receive the mark and swear allegiance to the beast. This angel is proclaiming the gospel to give the inhabitants of earth yet another witness throughout the book of Revelation and throughout the tribulation. But the question we ask is, what is this eternal gospel? Is it a new message? Is it a new revelation? Is it a new gospel? No, not at all. The angel tells us what it is. It's a simple message that God has always been sharing. Love, worship, and fear God. Also known as love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Now we get the part where we should love God, and we get the part that we should worship God. But the part where we should fear God has often been underrepresented. Many times it's interpreted that we should give reverence and honor and awe to the Lord. And yeah, absolutely we should. But if you've been reading Revelation with us, if you've been going through this, you can understand that God, when he pours out his wrath, this can be terrifying. He never intended for us to be recipients of that wrath, only the devil and his angels. However, anyone who aligns themselves with the devil and his angels will reap the punishment that he's pouring out against the wickedness on earth. And so we absolutely should fear him. We should reverence and honor and be in awe of him. But also, it's a great and terrifying day when the day of the Lord comes. And so keep that in mind as well. We shouldn't cower in fear, obviously, but we definitely should understand, as Jesus said, don't be afraid of someone who can just destroy your body. Be afraid of someone who can destroy body and soul in the fires of hell. And that certainly is God. So now we'll move on to the second angelic message. Well, the second angel pronounces his message in Revelation 14:8 when he says simply, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality." The second message is Babylon is fallen. Now, this is actually the first time Babylon is even mentioned in Revelation. And the first time it's mentioned, the angel is foretelling its doom and destruction. Now, Isaiah and Jeremiah both prophesied that Babylon would have a reoccurrence. It would be rebuilt either literally or figuratively and become a commercial center for the world. And yet its destruction is mentioned here in Revelation 14 and then again in Revelation 16. Now, some see Babylon as a literal city rebuilt by the Antichrist, and it becomes basically his capital city where he rules and reigns from. Other commentators see Babylon as figurative. The city of Babylon is more of a figurative, symbolic meaning, referring to two things: the false religion that it promotes, really emphasizing idolatry, and governmental control. The Babylon in the Old Testament, the literal city of Babylon, definitely met both of those two qualifications: idolatry / false religion and governmental control. Whether it's a literal city that is its foundation is rebuilt, cement is poured, buildings are created and erected and built and all this stuff, and people inhabit it or have government offices there, or whether it is simply a figurative city, the Bible is clear: it will be destroyed. The method of Babylon's seduction is also provided by the angel. Humanity's desperate search for pleasure in everything leads them astray. From what we see, what we taste, what we hear, and what we feel. We see this in our society. Have you ever talked to somebody and they told you those tacos are to die for? We desire pleasure in everything. And if we don't enjoy something, if it doesn't bring us pleasure, we don't do it. Sometimes this even comes into the church. We go to a church, a specific church, because it makes us feel good, because they sing the songs that we like. We come to hear a pastor that speaks to us, that encourages us, or whatever. And we don't watch TV shows that we don't enjoy. If we start watching a movie, for instance, I started watching a movie the other day, and 20 minutes into it, I stopped because I didn't enjoy it. Things that don't give us pleasure, we don't give our time to. And that it can permeate our spirit, so that because maybe God isn't talking to us as much as he used to, maybe we're not getting as much out of our Bible reading or our prayer, we're not really even engaging in spiritual disciplines, we're not really investing very much into our spiritual walk because we don't think it will give us the kind of pleasure that other things will give. We don't get a dopamine hit from reading Leviticus or Ezekiel the way we get a dopamine hit from checking our Facebook and seeing who's liked our things, or Instagram, and who's hearted our pictures. And so we avoid those things that don't give us pleasure, but we do it at the sake of our own souls. And here Babylon is seducing people through pleasure, and one of which is sexual immorality. We can be immoral by the way we handle all sorts of pleasures, not just sexual pleasure. And so anything that gives us pleasure that does not exalt Christ can become immoral, can become sinful, and it can certainly lead to idolatry. That was the second message of the angel. The third angel pronounces his message in Revelation 14, verses 9 through 11. And this is what the angel said: "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night. These worshipers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name." And so this third message is torment of the rebellious is forever. Now, it's possible that this angel declares this message on earth to warn the inhabitants once the gospel message has been preached by the previous angel, and once the warning about Babylon's fall has been expressed as well. While the Antichrist and the false prophet are lying to the people, God is providing the truth to anyone who's willing to listen. This angel provides devastating news. Allegiance to the Antichrist will ensure a person inherits eternal damnation. They will be desperate to die, just so the pain and the torment will end. Yet it will not, because they are eternally dead. There will be no rest from the pain and the torment. This is what awaits those who reject Christ. This is why missions and sharing our faith is so important. We wouldn't want our worst enemy to endure something like this, and it's 100% avoidable. All they need to do is accept Christ, and they won't even make it to this part of the story since they'll go in the rapture. Now, plenty of pastors contradict the Bible here, saying that God won't send people to hell. A very famous pastor several years ago came out with a book called Love Wins, where he declared that God doesn't send anybody to hell. You know, it's just a made up thing, and God would never do that because God is love, and his love wins at the end of the day. Yes, his love is an overwhelming expression of his character, but also is justice. And some pastors teach that the torment is just for a little while, and then you get another chance. You can accept Christ in hell and be sent to heaven. Or you're just destroyed and completely, you're obliterated, and you won't suffer in torment forever. This is concerning. This is an issue that pastors are actually teaching this. Men and women who study the Bible, and they come up with this false story because they have no concept of the holiness and the justice of God. If somebody murdered your parent, if somebody murdered your spouse, or murdered your child or grandchild, you would not want them to be set free from prison after just 30 days, not even after just 2 years. You would want them to rot in prison. You would want them to serve the rest of their life in punishment for the life that they took. You would want them to live a very long life, as long as it was behind bars. In that sense, we have that same sense of punishment and justice as God does. People who take the mark of the beast, thereby rejecting the eternal gospel of Christ, are lawless rebels who want nothing to do with God. They deserve no reprieve, and God will give them none. Next is the final message of the fourth and the fifth angel. The fourth and the fifth angels proclaim their messages, which are two separate angels, two separate messages, but they're actually connected. And the messages are this: the wicked will be destroyed. And this is not in contradiction to what I just said. This is the manner of, this is what happens on earth. The third angel is referring to what will happen to them for eternity, but the fourth and fifth angels refer to what will happen to them on earth. And so the message of both angels revolves around the harvest of the world, the harvest of the wicked for their punishment. And at the end of Revelation 14, verses 19 through 20 say this: So the angel swung his sickle across the earth and gathered the grape harvest of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress, as high as a horse's bridle, which is about 5 feet high, for 1,600 stadia, which is about 184 miles. So think about that for a second. Blood so high, it's at least between anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. We just take the middle road and say 5 feet high for 184 miles. Now, these verses describe the punishment of those who take the mark. And I think it's safe to assume that people are not going to be forced into a literal wine press and trampled by other people so that the wine is their blood. However, you definitely get the mental picture that God will judge the wicked and he will destroy them. There will be so many people who reject God that it will be a pretty horrific picture. If you want to read more on this, go to Isaiah 34, verses 2 through 8, and Jeremiah 25, verses 29 through 33. However, we must notice that this judgment of the wicked comes after 3 separate messages of warnings from angels to mankind. 3 more chances to turn and reject the Antichrist, the false prophet, his message, his mark, his image. However, the deception will be so strong and people will be so willfully blind, they still won't accept Christ or turn to God for deliverance. We hope this video has helped you understand Revelation chapter 14 a little bit better. Next week, we'll cover what's actually the shortest chapter in all of Revelation, chapter 15. And it might be short in length, but it's not lacking in content. So we hope that you have a wonderful week. Feel free to reach out to our church office if you need prayer. If there's any way that we can help you, friendshipchurch.cc is our website address. There's a way that you can contact us. We hope that you like these videos. Feel free to share them with other people that may be interested in them. You can actually share the whole playlist of The End is the Beginning. If you go to our church's YouTube channel, you can find playlists and find The End is the Beginning. And so you can share the whole thing so they can start from the beginning and go all the way through. We're in chapter 14. There's only 22 chapters in Revelation. So we do have a little bit more to go. But trust me, the best is yet to come, because when we get to the end, it won't be as much messages of doom and gloom and some of the horrific and terrible situations that are going on in earth. It will show us what we're looking for, what we're looking towards, a future and a hope where God creates a new heaven and a new earth, and it will be something wonderful. So we hope that you stick with us through this series. God bless you and have a wonderful week. We'll see you soon.